I want you guys to eventually come to the place where you realize that you are the guru, you are the teacher, you are the healer. Ultimately, nobody can heal you. Nobody can take away your suffering. You have to do it yourself. Maybe you have to go to 100 teachers before you realize that, but ultimately, you will eventually come to the place where you don't need me, you don't need this person, that person. You can do it yourself. And that's really what I want for everybody. I want you guys to get it that you are your own authority. You do not need anybody else.
Welcome to the Endless Possibilities Podcast, where the journey of spiritual awakening and energy healing unfolds.
Now, hello guys. Welcome to the Endless Possibilities Podcast. My name is Gareth Duignam, and I am the host of this YouTube channel and podcast. And today I am going to talk a little bit about the podcast. I'm also going to talk about me and my journey and how everything kind of came to be. So the following of this podcast has grown quite significantly recently. We've had some really amazing guests on the show, and some videos have just exploded with our followers, and there's a lot of people that are tuning in every week to the episodes and listening in on the conversations. And a lot of people don't really know much about me. And I'm going to talk a little bit about all of this, right? I'll talk about what the purpose of the podcast for me is and who I am and what my role outside of the podcast is and how I even found myself doing this podcast, right? How this came. It never really came out of, me wanting to create something. It's not like I just woke up one morning and went, I want to have a YouTube channel where I, host spiritual teachers and talk about it. And that was never the case for this. So I'm going to go back just a little bit. I'm going to give you a little bit of my background. So almost 10 years ago, actually, I'll go back even a little bit further. I was just a regular person going about my business, not very well. I had, a lot of human issues, like a lot of people do. I just felt that my life wasn't going the way I wanted it to go. Just something didn't feel right. I was suffering from a lot of fear in my system. I had fear of death, fear of aging, and I wanted to. Something didn't feel right in my system. Right, life just didn't make sense to me, and I was given a book by someone. It was a Louise Hay book, You Can Heal Your Life. And I started reading it on the airplane going on holidays to Spain. And I was just blown away by all these new concepts that I had they just didn't make any sense to me at the time. But something in me, I had a kind of an open mind. I didn't want to shut it down or dismiss it, and I'm glad I didn't. And I stuck with it, and I kind of worked through a lot of it over the next couple of weeks and months, and started to notice that I was creating positive change in my life. I was attracting prosperity into my life for the first time. I was having better relationships with people around me. I was somehow becoming a more confident person. My self-esteem was was increasing, and I was like, wow, there's something. There was a feedback. I was receiving feedback through my system. I was noticing change, and I was like, okay, well, there's something to this. And I started to change my beliefs around money, around happiness. I was also suffering from addiction at the time. I had dabbled with drugs in my teenage years and my early 20s, and I just wanted to break free. There was a vice around me, and I just wanted to be free. I didn't want anything having a control over my life anymore. So over the next couple of years, I started working on myself, you know, breaking patterns that were in my system around addiction, around neediness, around, relationships. And a lot of stuff changed. I started to move into a world where I was able to create prosperity for myself. I created a business. I was able to buy my own house. And all of this came from me having a better understanding of how the universe, there was a law, and that if I knew how this law worked, I could change everything. I could change matter by thinking about it. I could change who I was. Around 2010, 2011, I kind of took another approach to spirituality. I wanted to really focus on this fear of death that was in my system, fear of dying. And I pursued this sort of past life. I came across Brian Wise. I read a book called Many Lives, Many Masters, and it was about past life regression. And this opened up a whole new avenue. I was really kind of engaged, thrown into this, well, if there was a past life, then that means that if this life ends for me, then there's another life. So it kind of like pries my mind open that I'm not just a physical body, that maybe there's something else. And from the past life regression, that led me into out of body experiences. So I came across the concept of out of body. YouTube was kind of like, had just kind of come on the scene, and I started finding these interviews with gentlemen and women who had had out of body experiences, and I was like completely hooked. I was like, I want to do that. I want to have that experience. I came across this really well-known guy called Bob Monroe who had 3 books, um, and I bought everything I could. Amazon was kind of coming out at the time as well, and all of these, as I was buying these books, all these other suggestions were coming up in my feed, and I just bought everything. And I was like having the best time ever reading about this phenomena that, our physical form isn't just what we think, right? There seemed to be like this astral body that we had, and we could leave the physical form and travel, and we could go into different realities and meet with different beings and angels. And I was like, I want to do this. If I can do this, then I know that, if my physical form eventually dies, that I live on. And I started practicing all the time. I would meditate, I would listen to different audios, I would do hypnosis, I was saying affirmations to get out of my body. And then one evening, I just woke up and I had vibrations running up and down my body, and I separated and found myself in an out of body experience where I was flying across the night sky. And this was a paradigm shift for me. this changed everything. The next morning, I sat up in bed and I was like, oh my God, this is real. This is not just the fantasy of some person's mind. This was a real lived experience for me. And it changed everything. So for the next year and a half, I just started having spontaneous out of body experiences just opening up for me, just happening, 2 or 3 times a night. Um, I was able to travel to astral realms. I was able to see places where people go when they die. I was able to find people who had died and communicate with them, loved ones. And about a year and a half later, um, this portal that had opened up seemed to gradually get smaller and smaller, and the experiences stopped eventually. And I was then kind of thrown into this um, kind of classroom situation. So the out of body experiences stopped, but yet I found myself in these very controlled, almost like testing me for fear scenarios in the dream state. So I was having these very kind of like classroom style learning tests that were coming up. I would find myself like sat in classrooms listening to somebody teaching me, testing me, exploring my system for fear. And then I would find myself in these sort of scenarios where things would happen in dreams and I would have to kind of make the right decisions. And if I made the wrong decisions, that dream would come back and I would have to do it again. And then gradually over time, they diminished. And I found myself with an illness, a really mysterious illness that came along. And it kind of knocked me for it was kind of coming on for a long time, but like it peaked to this stage where I couldn't do anything, couldn't go to work, couldn't get out of bed, couldn't even walk. And it felt like it sucked the energy, it sucked the life out of me. My identity, I had been in the nutritional business. I was really kind of like uh, involved in working out and having a better body. And this sort of like really crushed that side of it for me. It was all kind of taken away. And I kind of, looking back now, I understand that it was just the universe's way of deconstructing this egoic kind of persona I had around myself and my kind of like who I was. And that had to be deconstructed. Around almost 10 years ago, 2016, I had gotten over the illness. I was about 2 years kind of on the better side of the illness. I wasn't 100%, but I was kind of getting my life back together. I was going to the gym and I just seemed to have a spontaneous spiritual awakening one morning in the gym. And I wrote about this. I wrote a book. So for those who don't know, I am the author of a book called Waking Up from the Dream. And this pretty much detailed kind of a step by step sequence of my awakening experience. So there was an awakening, an initial awakening. And from the awakening onwards, I was never the same. It changed the course of my life, sort of like actually pushed me into the role of being a spiritual seeker. So it was like, oh, wow, I had this really, really big peak experience where it felt like God had woke up through me, had looked out through my eyes, and I kind of had all this supreme knowledge flood in. I understood how the universe worked. I understood that, you know, God was dreaming itself into all of the individual characters. Everybody that I was perceiving was me. God was creating this world that we were having this experience in. And then that kind of aperture closed down after about 10 or 15 minutes. But I was different. I was never the same afterwards. I had entered into this state of like self-realization. But somehow I had kind of had this glimpse of this kind of end goal of what awakening was, and I wanted to get back to that. And it led me on this quest over the next 5 or 6 years, where I found myself traveling around, seeking out the help of saints and gurus and energy transmissions and healers. Yeah, I mean, I've done many. So if you're watching this now, you'll know me as the host of this show, and I'm sitting interviewing people. I'm hearing their story, and I'm sharing their stories with you guys. But I also I had gone through that, and I have done podcasts, and if you want to really have a detailed, I've been on a lot of big podcasts, well-known podcasts, and you can go onto my website. I'll put a link down below, the About Me page, and I have a whole list of all the big podcasts that I've been on as a guest talking about my experience. And I won't get into too much. I don't want to, uh, you know, go over it again. I've spoke about my story like maybe 20 times on different podcasts. So if you want to, I'll put the link down below if you want to hear all my story. Um, yeah, I was kind of trust into all of this. Kind of like never, I'm a bit of an introvert. I enjoyed, I enjoyed the business side of my life. I had run this business for 15 years, and as I was going through my awakening, my business started to kind of crumble. The that drive, that ego that was kind of really useful for, succeeding in business it seemed to be really diminished. And I kind of, over the next 3 years, I kind of watched all the hard work that I had put into a business kind of crumble a little bit. And I never imagined myself being in the position of, having a YouTube channel or being a teacher or any of that kind of stuff. And early on in the awakening, I had this sort of like supreme knowledge came in, and I was shown that I was going to become a teacher, and I was going to work with energy, and I was going to work specifically with the energy in the spine, which is the Kundalini energy. I had no idea what that was at the time. And, fast forward a couple of years, I now work with people in one-on-one sessions. We run retreats, and I give an energy transmission, one of a few different energy transmissions, but Shaktipat. And Shaktipat is the transference of energy from the teacher, the guru, the awakened being to the aspirant in order to help them awaken spiritually. And Shaktipat also helps the rewiring of the nervous system. It helps your life force energy, the Kundalini at the base of the spine, awaken, and then this beautiful transformation starts to unfold where that life force starts to rise and purifies the aspirant's energy body and chakra system. Yeah, so that's pretty much. I had kind of found myself not ever wanting to do this, but just sort of my business had closed. I had started doing meditations online with, a small number of friends, and it just organically grew. Um, and I have my own personal YouTube channel. So it's called True Spiritual Awakening on my website. And um, kind of found myself in this role of teacher where people were turning up and they were listening to me talking about my experiences. I would talk about it, and they would listen, and people found it useful. And yeah, over the next couple of years, started doing retreats, started working with people. People started going through their own spiritual awakenings to a very, like, the people that I kept working with, they had gone further and further and higher states of consciousness. And a lot of them actually, not a lot of them, but there's quite a few that actually went on to be teachers themselves. Um, and that's part of the work now. I'm still kind of working. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy the one-on-one aspect of finding people that I see who are kind of potentially moving into that role of teacher themselves, and just kind of sharing that kind of mentorship that's kind of I've become very good at. It's like these people are kind of now walking along that path, and the path that I kind of found myself on, and I seem to be very good at, showing them the pitfalls. Okay, well, this is what's coming up. You get around the corner here, you might encounter this and that, and I seem to be very good at helping people kind of transition from, just because someone goes through a spiritual awakening or has the mystical experience or, does plant medicine, it doesn't qualify them to be a teacher just because they have energy or just because, they've done a couple of healing classes. It really doesn't. I think the whole stepping into the teacher it can be very much an ego trip. It can be a trap. So I tend to find there are some people that are similar to me where it's just something that's naturally opening up, and I love working with them. So that's part of it, and part of the work I do as well is retreats. I do week-long retreats. I seem to work with really, really amazing people. They come. A lot of my work is, transmission based. It's awakening. It's working with the energy in the body, um, and are really transformative. It's one of the biggest blessings. I really enjoy the retreat side. I really enjoy, um, spending a week with really amazing individuals and souls. And just to kind of flip it now back to the podcast, this whole podcast was kind of something similar, right? Wasn't ever meant to be what it is. I think I'm just coming up on 20,000 subscribers now to my YouTube channel. And never in a million years did I think there would be 20,000 people following anything that I did on YouTube. Even when I made my first YouTube video like 7 years ago, I felt so awkward with talking on camera and talking about my experiences. Yeah, so just what's kind of transpired from the whole thing is really remarkable. And I appreciate every single person who tunes in to my own YouTube channel, even though I don't do a whole lot of talking anymore on my own YouTube channel and in my groups. Mm. Yeah, so I kind of found that eventually I found myself in this place of like, the only thing that I really know is that I actually don't know that much. After coming through the other side of this awakening, is that, when I stand in front of anybody and I'm 100% sure, or it has to be this way, or you're wrong and I'm right, and this is how it was for me, I've lost. I've lost. I've gone wrong in my track. I've gone wrong on my path. I really don't know anything. I know that when I close my eyes and when I come into my heart space and when I share that with other people, it's really beautiful. And there's a truth in it, and there's a love and a connection. And that anything that comes out of my mouth where I have to convince anybody of anything, I'm wrong. And this sort of just presented itself last year, this year, early on in this year, where I just kind of had this feeling of being an imposter. I was like, I'm sitting here in front of 100 people on my Zoom meditations, giving a talk, and I just felt like I was this big imposter. And I was like, anything that's coming out of my mouth isn't it. It really isn't it. You know, all I care about is truth. All I care about is like, you know, being it, not talking about it, not trying to convince people, not trying to have an opinion, not saying that I know what's right and you don't, and I'm the authority here and you should listen to what I say. I don't want to be that. I don't enjoy that. I want people to turn up. I want people to close their eyes, to drop into their heart space and to feel truth, not to have, words and convincing and stories and I'm this and I'm that and you should listen to what I do and I can take away your pain and your suffering and I can heal you from your anxiety and your insecurities because I can't. I can't. So when you sit with me and you meditate, I can open up more of what you are. We are all just one consciousness, right? And what awakening is that consciousness awakening to the reality of itself through each individual, right? So it's not like you or me or anyone is better or greater or more evolved or spiritually advanced. Us as a human, we don't get anything from spiritual awakening. In fact, we lose more than we ever had. My life crumbled after spiritual awakening. And what was left was the greater reality, God. Some I don't. There's all of these different words, and they all have different meanings for different people. But we'll just call it the universe, right? Or oneness is just oneness. Is just oneness awakening to itself through the individual form, and it then peering out through my eyes and knowing itself through the individual. And I know that when I sit with other individuals, there seems to be a field that opens up, and each individual, it's like they can then tap into more of what they already are. It's like this sort of symbiotic transfer of consciousness through all the different pinpoints of consciousness that are coming together. And this is really, really, it's a lived, felt experience. It's a knowing. It's not an intellectual understanding. It's not me sitting here convincing you with my words that you need to follow me, you need to learn from me. It's you coming into contact with what you already are, right? And it doesn't just happen overnight, right? It didn't for me anyway. It was like layers and layers of an onion being peeled back time after time after time. And I'm still learning. I'm still going through this. And when I say learning, it's not like intellectual learning. I'm just noticing more and more of what is not God or the universe in my human. And even though like I've again in my book, I laid out all these different stages, and about 4 or 5 years ago, I kind of had this huge awakening where nothing ever seemed to come after that. I couldn't deepen the experience, no matter how much meditation. It just never seemed to want to unfold anymore. And then it kind of forced me back into me just being here as a human. And how can I just be a better human here in this reality? What can I do to be more helpful, to be kinder? What can I find in my system? Is there still ego here? Am I still holding on to traumas? And it kind of goes against the whole thing of like, enlightenment. Oh, you're enlightened, or you've reached the highest stage of awakening. You should be perfect. And I just want to say that that doesn't seem to be the case. You can awaken to a really high degree of spirituality and still see conditioning, human conditioning, belief patterns in your system. You're not perfect. You're really not. You're not perfect. You're not a perfect human. You can still act in ways that hurt other people. You can still, find things patterns that haven't been noticed. You can't find them with your intellect. You know, there can be stuff in your system that's 20 years old and you've never felt it until something, some new scenario, some new person comes into your life, and all of a sudden you're able to see yourself in a mirror that's been held up to you from a new situation, a new job, a new career. Maybe you become a teacher, and now all of a sudden you have students or people who come on your retreats, and all of a sudden what's unresolved in you is now being reflected back to you in the student that you've never had the opportunity to look at. So for the last couple of years, I've been kind of working on that and trying to like refine my own process as a human, right? Just been a better human, been kinder. And that can show up, but that can look like many different things. That could be you being stuck in, a relationship that didn't work or that hasn't worked for many years, and being strong enough to say that, oh, okay, this has to go in a different direction. It could be, you working a job that just doesn't serve you anymore. You know, you it just doesn't serve you. It's holding you back. You know, many, many different things. Friendships can fall away. Mm. Yeah, living in the wrong city. It's just this city just isn't right for me, and just been brave enough that okay, I have to move. I have to go somewhere else on my journey. So that's kind of led me to this place where I've kind of gone, okay, I don't really feel like I want to sit here preaching to people anymore. I don't feel that I need to sell myself, to make myself out to be some great teacher and promote myself or put myself up on a pedestal. And I've kind of gone the opposite, where I've gone quieter. I don't communicate as much in my YouTube videos. I don't talk on my Zoom meditations anymore. And I'm just kind of like, yeah, just come, just close your eyes, come meditate with me, drop into that space of truth, of knowing. it's there. It's there all the time. And this to me is the ultimate teaching. It is the ultimate teaching. It's like there's just truth, just the mind and the surface level, and then if we get underneath that, we don't have to listen to the words. There's just a transference of energy, of presence. And even as I'm talking in this podcast or this interview, that energy transfer is going on. And if you can kind of notice, if you can get, quieter and drop underneath the analytical part of your mind, you might start to notice that there's an energy that you hadn't noticed. And maybe it kind of brings you into a meditative state. Maybe you might start to notice that there's an energy coming in, through the top of the head. And I'm going to get to the whole podcast and the interviews. And so this podcast sort of evolved from me and a former person that I had worked with on a one-to-one level. And they had sort of then found themselves moving into the role of a teacher. And we would have conversations. And one day I just decided to record the conversation we were having. And I said, at the end, Eva, this is a really amazing conversation. And I said, I would love to share this with people. And that's how it kind of developed. It then went on to us meeting once a week, us having conversations about spiritual awakening. And, we created a little YouTube channel, and it was very slow in the beginning. But a lot of people really appreciated it. Eva then went on, she had a child, she got pregnant, and yeah, her focus went in a different direction. And I kind of found that I was like, okay, I'm here. The channel is still going, but what do I do with it? I can only do so much talking by myself. So it kind of just then developed into, I would invite people on and I would have guests. And yeah, for the last 2 years, I have been just as a passion. There's like, people might go, oh, it's it's like a business or something. It's not a business. Let me tell you now, running a podcast, there's so much work that goes into it. I mean, if you could see all the equipment I have here, and then like even afterwards, after the recording, there's like so much effort that goes into editing it, the graphics for the thumbnails, the descriptions. Yeah, there's a lot of work. So it really is more of just a joy. I love everything to do with spiritual awakening and energy healing. And I genuinely enjoy talking to people, listening, hearing their journey, their story, what they do. And I kind of felt that somehow I had kind of built up this platform, and now I could kind of build a platform for the followers that they could come and, kind of tune in, hear me having these conversations with the people. And just to give a little bit of context, just around what my hope for the podcast is for you guys. So, firstly, even though I really, really enjoy every single guest that I have on, it's not an endorsement. I'm not, just because I have a person on the show, it's not me endorsing them as a teacher, as an energy healer. What my goal for the show is that I can somehow deepen the comprehension of spiritual awakening by having the conversations. You guys can listen in. It can be explored from multiple perspectives. We can have people on from Bhakti backgrounds, energy healing, Shakti, Kundalini, out of body experiences. And we can see that there's all of these different paths, all of these different perspectives, and none of them are wrong. Everything is there under the umbrella of spiritual awakening, of consciousness, and we can explore it from many, many different avenues. And we don't discredit anybody. We don't say that this is wrong and this is right. But it's not an endorsement, right? So all the different people, I don't know, there's like 100 people now, there's 100 interviews. I don't endorse uh, anyone, right? Yes, there's some amazing people. Some of the conversations I love, like I totally love. And it's funny that some of the ones that I enjoy so much don't get as many views. They're not as popular. And then some of the ones that are really popular, they don't particularly fit with my idea of, spiritual awakening and, uh, you know, um, so it's funny, and I kind of then also see, because I know quite a few, I know 20,000 subscribers, but there's quite a few of the subscribers that I know pretty well. There's like, I don't know how many people have turned up in my groups and come to one-to-one sessions, and I see, I know quite a lot of them, and one of the things that I do notice is that I see them jumping from teacher to teacher to healer to healer. And also, that's not what I want either, right? I want you guys to eventually come to the place where you realize that you are the guru, you are the teacher, you are the healer. You know, ultimately, nobody can heal you, nobody can take away your suffering. You have to do it yourself. Maybe you have to go to 100 teachers before you realize that, but ultimately you will eventually come to the place where you don't need me, you don't need this person, that person. You can do it yourself. And that's really what I want for everybody. I want you guys to get it, that you are your own authority. You do not need anybody else. You do not need me. Does it help to meditate in my group? Absolutely. Did it help me when I was going through my journey to meditate with, the saints and the masters and the gurus? Absolutely did it help. But I don't want you to be stuck on that journey of endlessly being a window shopper in spirituality, because that's what it is. And even though I'm kind of like sharing all these amazing teachers, um, you know, do not get stuck just jumping from teacher to teacher to teacher, because you're just going to be endlessly spiraling, around and around, caught up in a loop. I want you guys to know that you have it within you, right? One of the things that's been coming up for me recently, I just spoke about it, is like identifying things that I am really uncomfortable with, you know, noticing things that I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. And then it's like, oh, well, actually, that's exactly what I need to do. You know, have I gone to healers in the past? It's something that I didn't do a whole lot of. Mm. I went to Elizabeth Rose. I interviewed Elizabeth twice, and she would kind of channel angels, and there was a lot of, she would talk and tell you what you were doing, or what was going on in your system, removing anger, removing fear, blah blah blah. And I never really paid too much attention to the words. I was like, oh, I can feel, there is something going on energetically. And I never really focused too much on what was coming through, you know intellectually. So this is something that I've noticed within me now, is that I'm finding that nobody can remove the lessons that I'm meant to experience for myself. Life is not meant to be roses and rainbows and unicorns. You are going to find that there are challenges, that you are going to be hurt. You know, you're in a human body. This stuff is going to come up time and time again. And I've gone through it and I've thought that I've, I've cleared that. I'm now on the other side, and only to find that something new opens up in my life. And here I am again, finding ego that I thought I've worked on, or, something within me that surfaced up that I had, me as a teenager has the same energetic feeling as when I used to get really frustrated in my early 20s and my teenage years. I didn't get rid of it. It's still there. It's been completely pushed down. And now this new situation is showing me this in myself. And for anybody to say that I'm going to come in here and I'm going to take that and I'm going to clear it for you and dissolve it and it's gone. If you think about this on an evolutionary model, right? If consciousness is evolving and we are it, and these lessons are coming up in our lives to help us evolve, get rid of fear, become more loving, we have to go through them, right? And nobody can take away that. Nobody can just take it. I'm going to take your pain away. I'm going to take your suffering away. We have to go through it. We have to firstly identify it as a contraction in our systems. We have to find that knot, that, trigger, and then we need to go off and we need to explore that. If we feel uncomfortable in public speaking, what is the best way to get over that, right? Go and do stand-up comedy. Go into a club and stand up in front of everybody and tell jokes. If you don't like dancing, go and take up ballroom dancing. Find things that make you feel uncomfortable. Put yourself out of your comfort zone. Go and do whatever, whatever. Just find something and do it. Do not sit in, your room meditating for the next 10 years thinking that you're going to be free of all of this, because you aren't. What will happen is you'll go back out into the world and you'll be faced with something and your enlightenment will disappear. You will be faced with your shit that you have suppressed, that you have pushed down, that you've chose to spiritually bypass, and it will come up and you will be triggered, and you might go into a rage for 3 days and you might totally lose all of your awakening and feel like you're back in contractedness and separation and hurt and, deep sadness. And then that's a really, really good indication of where you are, right? You're only as enlightened as your last trigger, as your last samskara that's come up. So that's, yeah. I'm creating this sort of platform with the podcast, bringing these amazing people on, and they are all amazing. But ultimately, I want you guys to go, yeah, okay, I resonate with this teacher, or I resonate with that teacher, and great, go learn from them, buy their books, do their meditations. But I don't want you to be stuck just in this endless loop of jumping from teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher. And I should put a disclaimer, and I probably will start putting a disclaimer at the start of every interview that I do, that it's not me giving an endorsement for the teacher, right? So, yeah, so that's the purpose of today's podcast and this video, is for me to explain who I am, what the purpose of this podcast is. I don't want you guys constantly on the mind surface level, flicking, scrolling, new teacher, new energy transmission, running here, running there, constantly. It's kind of like you're swapping the high of shopping online, of gratification, instant gratification with social media, all of this kind of stuff, and you're kind of just flipping it into spirituality, and yeah, just constantly going from teacher to teacher. So yeah, this was the purpose of today's podcast and video, and um, so I really enjoyed today's conversation. I hope you guys did too. I hope you learned a little bit more about me and the podcast. And if you want to learn more about my story, you can look at my book, or you can go and you can watch previous podcasts that I did. I'll put a link down below to my website, the About Me page, and you can go through the list of the different podcasts that I've been on. I've been on Jeff Mara, Wisdom from North, some big ones, and they've all been fun. And yeah, so that's a little bit about the podcast and me and you guys, because you guys are the ones consuming the information that I'm putting up there with all these amazing teachers. So yeah, it's been fun. So thank you so much. Thank you for following me. Thank you for following the show. And yeah, I really appreciate you guys so much. Genuinely, it's amazing. Let me know what you think. Put a comment down below. I read all of them. I reply to all of them. And yeah, if you want to give me some feedback on the podcasts, maybe if you want to suggest guests for future interviews, let me know. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
This has been the Endless Possibilities Podcast, where the journey of spiritual awakening and energy healing unfolds. Gareth is a lifelong seeker of truth, a spiritual teacher and author, and it's his passion to delve into the profound world of consciousness. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we hope you've gotten something from it. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, the podcast is available on YouTube and all the major podcasting platforms. Find us on Instagram at _mother_force. Take care, and we'll see you soon on the Endless Possibilities Podcast.